Top 10 extreme vampire horror movies of all time. Forget the brooding, romantic vampires. These bloodsuckers are brutal, disturbing, and relentless. We're diving into the darkest corners of vampire horror, ranking the most extreme, grotesque, and mind-bending films that redefine terror. Buckle up, horror fans. This list isn't for the faint of heart. 10 Daybreakers, 2009. Directors, Michael and Peter Spierig. The premise. Set in 2019, a plague has transformed most of humanity into vampires. With humans nearly extinct, blood supplies are dwindling, and society faces collapse. Vampire hematologist Edward Dalton, Ethan Hawke, works for a pharmaceutical corporation desperately trying to develop a blood substitute. When he encounters a group of human survivors with a potential cure, Edward faces a moral dilemma that could change everything. Why it's extreme? Blood harvesting factories, grotesque mutations, and vampires exploding in chain reactions of fire. When the blood supply runs low, the infected turn into monstrous subsiders, feral creatures with cracked bones and stretched skin. The Spierig brothers create a fully realized vampire society, with underground walkways, blood-infused coffee, and modified cars with daytime driving capabilities. The subsider transformation sequences show vampires who haven't fed turning into bat-like monstrosities with twisted limbs and elongated features. Perhaps most disturbing are the harvesting facilities where the remaining humans are kept in comatose states, drained of their blood like living batteries, a stark metaphor for resource exploitation. The film uses stark cinematography with a blue-green filter that creates a clinical, dystopian atmosphere. The production design thoughtfully considers how a vampire-dominant world would function, from architecture to transportation, making the horror feel eerily plausible. Most shocking moment, a gruesome vampire massacre, where sunlight doesn't just burn, it detonates them in spectacular, fiery bursts. These visceral scenes of vampire combustion create chain reactions of exploding bodies that are as visually stunning as they are grotesque. 9. The Hunger, 1983. Director, Tony Scott. The premise. Ancient Egyptian vampire Miriam Blaylock, Catherine Deneuve, has lived for thousands of years, taking companions whom she promises eternal life. When her current lover John, David Bowie, begins rapidly aging despite her promises of immortality, she seeks help from Dr. Sarah Roberts, Susan Sarandon, a gerontologist studying premature aging. As John deteriorates, Miriam sets her sights on Sarah as her next companion. Why it's extreme? A blend of sensuality and horror. This film doesn't hold back on explicit seduction or terrifying body horror. Watching Bowie's character deteriorate at a horrifying speed is pure nightmare fuel. Tony Scott's film explicitly explores the connection between vampirism, sexuality, and addiction in ways that were groundbreaking for its time. The aging makeup effects by Dick Smith, The Exorcist, show John's deterioration in excruciating detail, his transformation from youthful beauty to decrepit age occurring in a matter of days. The film's infamous lesbian seduction scene between Deneuve and Sarandon was controversial upon release, blurring the lines between eroticism and predation. The psychological horror of John's fate, not death, but eternal imprisonment in a coffin while still conscious, joining Miriam's collection of previous lovers, creates an existential dread that lingers long after viewing. Scott's background in advertising is evident in the film's stylish visuals, using slow motion, atmospheric lighting, and a haunting soundtrack featuring classical music and Bauhaus, Bela Lugosi's Dead, to create a hypnotic, dreamlike quality. Most shocking moment, the slow, agonizing transformation of a young, beautiful man into a desperate, ancient husk, begging for an end that never comes. Bowie's performance makes the horror of aging centuries in mere days feel viscerally real and deeply disturbing. 8. Cronos, 1993. Director, Guillermo del Toro. The premise. Antique dealer Jesus Gris discovers a 450-year-old mechanical scarab device hidden inside an ancient statue. When the device attaches itself to him, injecting something into his body, he begins to experience renewed youth and vigor, but also an insatiable thirst for human blood. As his humanity slips away, he must protect his granddaughter Aurora from both his growing bloodlust and a dying industrialist who seeks the device for himself. Why it's extreme? A cursed device that fuses with flesh, turning its user into something not quite human. The protagonist's descent into addiction includes licking blood off bathroom floors and sprouting an exoskeleton beneath his skin. Del Toro's debut feature reimagines vampirism as a mechanical infection, creating a unique body horror that feels invasive and violating. The Kronos device itself is beautifully designed, an intricate golden scarab with clockwork innards and needle-like legs that pierce the skin and inject its transformative substance. The film portrays vampirism as addiction, with Jesus experiencing withdrawal symptoms when separated from the device and engaging in increasingly desperate behavior to satisfy his cravings. The relationship between Jesus and his granddaughter provides emotional weight, as he struggles to maintain his humanity while transforming into something monstrous. Del Toro's attention to detail and practical effects create a tactile quality to the horror, making the physical transformation feel painfully real. Most shocking moment: peeling back his own human skin to reveal a pale, insect-like form beneath. A grotesque rebirth you won't forget. This scene epitomizes Del Toro's ability to blend beauty and revulsion, as Jesus emerges from his decaying human shell like a butterfly from a chrysalis. Except there's nothing beautiful about what he's becoming. 7. Vamper, 1932. Director, Carl Theodor Dreyer. The premise: Alan Gray, a student of the occult, arrives at a remote inn near the village of Cordon-Pierre. His stay coincides with strange occurrences. Shadows move independently of their owners. An old man enters his room to leave a package marked "To be opened upon my death," and a manor's inhabitant suffers from mysterious blood loss. Gray becomes entangled in uncovering the vampire haunting the village while experiencing increasingly disturbing visions. Why it's extreme? Surreal visuals that defy reality, shadows moving on their own, dreamlike sequences, and an overwhelming sense of dread. Despite being nearly a century old, Vamper remains profoundly unsettling due to Dreyer's experimental approach to horror. Using gauze over the camera lens, double exposures, and negative film, he creates a dreamlike atmosphere where reality itself seems unreliable. The film operates on a logic of nightmares rather than conventional narrative, with Gray experiencing his own death and burial from inside the coffin, a sequence that induces genuine claustrophobia. The vampire in this film is an old woman who appears harmless, subverting expectations and suggesting that evil can hide in plain sight. The film's use of non-professional actors contributes to its uncanny quality, as their slightly awkward performances enhance the dreamlike atmosphere rather than detract from it. Most shocking moment: a slow, suffocating death beneath an avalanche of flour. No blood, no fangs, just pure, existential horror. This unusual death scene in a flour mill creates an image of overwhelming whiteness that contrasts with the film's otherwise shadowy palette, making it all the more striking and symbolic as the villain is literally buried in the purity he has violated. 6. Thirst, 2009. Director, Park Chan-wook. The premise: Sang-hyun, a devoted Catholic priest, volunteers for an experimental vaccine treatment for a deadly virus. When the treatment fails and he receives a blood transfusion from an unknown source, he recovers but develops a thirst for human blood. As he struggles with his new vampire nature, he becomes involved with Tae-ju, the abused wife of his childhood friend. Their relationship spirals into passion, violence, and murder as Sang-hyun's religious convictions crumble. Why it's extreme? Park Chan-wook delivers a visceral, unflinching look at temptation, murder, and obsession. The violence is raw, the sex is explicit, and redemption is nowhere in sight. Park approaches vampirism as a metaphor for forbidden desire and moral corruption, showing Sang-hyun's transformation from selfless priest to murderer with unflinching detail. The film's exploration of Catholic guilt alongside vampire mythology creates a unique psychological dimension to the horror, as Sang-hyun tries to reconcile his faith with his new nature, feeding on coma patients and attempting suicide when the sun rises, only to heal instantly. The relationship between Sang-hyun and Tae-ju evolves from rescue to complicity to toxic codependence, with neither character emerging as heroic. Park's trademark visual style combines beauty with brutality, using striking compositions and colors to heighten the emotional impact of increasingly disturbing scenes. Most shocking moment: a botched, agonizingly slow murder where nothing goes as planned. Covered in blood and vomit, the killers realize just how far they've fallen. This scene subverts expectations of vampire power by showing how messy, difficult, and morally devastating taking a human life can be, even with supernatural strength. 5. Blade 2, 2002. Director, Guillermo del Toro. The premise: vampire hunter Blade must form an uneasy alliance with the Blood Pack, an elite team of vampires originally trained to kill him. Their common enemy, the Reapers, a mutated strain of vampires immune to most traditional weaknesses, with insatiable hunger and the ability to infect others rapidly. As the group hunts the Reapers through the sewers and clubs of Prague, trust issues and hidden agendas threaten their mission. Why it's extreme? The Reapers, a terrifying new breed of vampires with unhinging jaws and a thirst that never ends. Their attacks are vicious, their biology is revolting, and their autopsy scene is disgustingly unforgettable. Del Toro elevates the superhero horror hybrid of the original film by introducing body horror elements that push vampire mythology into new territory. The Reapers represent vampirism as disease rather than dark gift, with their pale, veined bodies and three-piece jaws that split open to reveal a proboscis-like tongue used for feeding. Their accelerated metabolism means they must feed constantly, making them the predators of predators. The film's action sequences are visceral and bloody, with creative kills utilizing Blade's arsenal of silver, UV light, and edged weapons. Del Toro's creature design and practical effects, supplemented by early 2000s CGI, create monsters that feel physically present and genuinely threatening. Most shocking moment: the cold, clinical dissection of a Reaper, revealing bone-plated hearts and a parasitic feeding system straight out of your worst nightmares. This autopsy scene demonstrates Del Toro's attention to biological detail, creating a vampire variant with its own believable anatomy and evolutionary adaptations. 4. From Dusk Till Dawn, 1996. Director, Robert Rodriguez. The premise: criminal brothers Seth and Richie Gecko take a family hostage and use their RV to cross the Mexican border. They stop at the Titty Twister, a truck stop strip club that promises safety until dawn, when their contact will meet them. As the night progresses, the staff and dancers reveal themselves to be vampires, trapping the criminals and their hostages in a fight for survival until sunrise. Why it's extreme? A dive bar run by grotesque, shape-shifting vampires. Limbs fly, heads roll, and practical effects create some of the wildest, goriest transformations in horror history. Rodriguez and writer Quentin Tarantino pull off one of cinema's greatest bait-and-switches, starting as a crime thriller before transforming, literally and figuratively, into outrageous vampire horror. The film revels in its excessive gore and creative kills, with vampires that don't just bite but completely transform into grotesque creatures with elongated features, reptilian traits, and rat-like qualities. Tom Savini's practical effects work creates memorably disgusting vampire deaths, including melting faces, exploding bodies, and impalement via stage light. The film maintains its dark humor throughout, finding the absurd comedy in its increasingly outlandish violence while never undercutting the genuine horror of the situation. Most shocking moment: the instant Salma Hayek's hypnotic dancer morphs into a nightmarish serpent-like creature. The film never slows down after that. This transformation scene represents the film's genre shift in microcosm, the object of desire becoming the embodiment of death, and remains one of cinema's most jarring tonal pivots. 3. Near Dark, 1987. Director, Catherine Bigelow. The premise: farm boy Caleb Colton is seduced by May, a beautiful drifter who turns out to be a vampire. After she bites him, he joins her nomadic family of vampires who travel across the American Midwest in RVs with blacked-out windows, feeding on whoever crosses their path. Reluctant to kill, Caleb is given a week to prove his worth to the group, while his father searches for him. Why it's extreme? Forget capes and castles. These vampires are sadistic nomads leaving a trail of bodies in their wake. No romance, no rules, just brutal survival. Bigelow reinvents vampire mythology by stripping away gothic trappings and reimagining vampires as something akin to serial killers with a supernatural condition. Never once using the word vampire, the film presents its bloodsuckers as a dysfunctional family unit, with Lance Henriksen and Bill Paxton delivering chilling performances as ancient predators disguised as modern drifters. The film's vampires are addicts, finding as much pleasure in the kill as in the feeding. Their predatory nature is shown in stark contrast to Caleb's reluctance, creating genuine moral tension as he tries to survive without becoming like them. Bigelow's background in action cinema brings a visceral quality to the vampire attacks, while her artistic sensibilities elevate the visual storytelling through striking compositions of blood, fire, and the vast American landscape. Most shocking moment: the bar massacre scene is pure sadism, with the vampire clan toying with their victims before slaughtering them one by one. A man's throat is slashed, turned into a gruesome blood fountain for the vampires to drink from. They make him beg for it. This extended sequence exemplifies the film's unflinching portrayal of vampires as predators who enjoy playing with their food. 2. 30 Days of Night, 2007. Director, David Slade. The premise. In Barrow, Alaska, the sun sets for 30 days during winter. As the town prepares for its annual month of darkness, a stranger arrives and begins disabling communications and transportation. When night falls, a group of vampires attacks the town, methodically hunting down and slaughtering the residents. Sheriff Eben Olson and a handful of survivors must find ways to stay alive until daylight returns. Why it's extreme? These vampires don't seduce, they hunt. With jet black eyes and razor-sharp teeth, they rip their victims apart with animalistic brutality. The town is a hunting ground, and the humans are prey. Based on the graphic novel by Steve Niles and Ben Templesmith, the film reimagines vampires as apex predators who have evolved beyond humanity. Speaking in their own guttural language and moving with inhuman speed, these creatures represent a return to vampires as monsters rather than misunderstood anti-heroes. Their leader, Marlowe, approaches the hunt with tactical intelligence, systematically eliminating escape routes and potential weapons. The film's setting creates a perfect narrative trap, a month of darkness in an isolated location, while its stark visual style emphasizes the contrast between blood and snow, creating striking images of violence against the white landscape. Director David Slade employs a desaturated color palette that enhances the cold brutality of both the environment and the predators. Most shocking moment, an overhead tracking shot of the town's massacre. A bird's-eye view of absolute carnage, blood splattering across snow as the vampires feast. This technically impressive shot shows the scale of the attack while creating a sense of helpless observation, as if watching ants being destroyed from above. 1. Let the Right One In, 2008. Director, Tomas Alfredson. The premise. In 1980 Stockholm, 12-year-old Oscar is bullied at school and dreams of revenge. He befriends Eli, a strange girl who only comes out at night and walks barefoot in the snow. As their relationship develops, Eli is revealed to be a vampire who has been 12 for a very long time, dependent on her adult companion who murders people to provide her with blood. As the murders draw police attention and Oscar's bullies become more violent, the two outsiders find connection in their shared isolation. Why it's extreme? A child vampire with an eerie, detached cruelty. Her human handler, a disturbing reflection of what her young friend might one day become. The violence is stark, realistic, and shockingly brutal. Alfredson's film uses vampire mythology to explore themes of childhood loneliness, dependency, and moral corruption. The horror comes not just from the occasional bursts of violence, but from the quiet suggestion that Oscar may be groomed to replace Eli's aging companion, continuing a cycle of manipulation and murder. The film presents Eli's vampirism as both liberating and imprisoning. She has power, but is eternally dependent on others. The Swedish setting provides a backdrop of snow and silence that amplifies the film's emotional isolation. Alfredson uses minimal music and lingering shots to create tension, with violence that erupts suddenly and without stylization. The young actors deliver remarkably nuanced performances, with Lena Linderson's Eli balancing childlike vulnerability with ancient predatory instinct. Most shocking moment, the silent swimming pool massacre, where bullies are torn apart, but we only see the aftermath. Floating limbs, blood in the water, a quiet, horrifying revenge. The restraint in this scene, showing the results rather than the action, makes it more disturbing, as our imagination fills in the brutality that occurred beneath the water's surface. These films prove that vampire horror isn't just about fangs and capes. It's about pushing boundaries, shocking audiences, and redefining what true terror looks like. Which of these films left you reeling? Did we miss a contender? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more horror deep dives.